Myron Lutzi, episode 20, Second Nature Friday. Heading into the weekend. What's up, bro?
I can't believe it. 20 episodes. I remember when we were crossing like 3 or 4 and we're like, this is the point where most podcasts kind of hang it up. We blew way past that one. 20. Amazing.
2 times a week. Never a shortage of things to talk about here. And we got a great docket here today. I wanted to start with something that I learned about from Brendan Madigan, our guest on the episode that came out earlier this week, that I think will tie that episode together with this one and maybe add a finer point to some of the things that Brendan said about the importance of retail and how to engage a community that's built around the temples to the culture, as we called them on the episode earlier this week. You want me to launch right into it?
Drop in. Let's do this.
Okay, so here in the San Francisco Bay Area, there is a specialty run store called Renegade Running. It's owned by a guy named Victor Diaz. It's become really popular here in the Bay Area, and they've done a great job of building a brand around it. If you look them up on Instagram, they use their very noticeable logo mark. It's just an R. They print their own awesome looking t-shirts. They do some collab products with some of the brands that sell through their retail establishment. And what they're doing right now is trying to expand to Southern California. So Renegade Running goes to SoCal. And what they're doing is raising money to achieve this objective of growth through their community in a way that I think is really interesting. So I'll put a link to this in the notes of today's episode, but there's a platform on the internet that I had never heard of before that they're using to do this crowdfunding. This website is SMBX. The URL is thesmbx.com. So what they're doing is raising $425,000 to open this new Southern California outlet of Renegade Running. They are now sitting at 112,000 invested, and they're calling this a bond offering. So the idea is that, for example, if I were to put $50,000 into this Renegade expansion, hypothetically over a 72-month period, I would expect to earn 10% interest. In other words, in 3 years, I would hope to get, 72 months. What is that? 6 years?
I'm terrible at public math.
So that's 6 years. So in 6 years, I would hope to get a 10% return, meaning get 60,000 back. So what Brendan brought this up about was just a retail shop is built on community. And this is a way in which Renegade's community can support the expansion of the business. And obviously, for people who are investors or looking to make a little bit of a return on capital, it's different than just like a GoFundMe, right? It's something where you would hope to earn a return on that investment, but it functions like a GoFundMe, right? You are helping somebody bootstrap a new thing. It's community driven and crowdfunded, but with a hypothetical return attached to it. Of course, this is a non-guaranteed, unsecured investment that does carry some risk to it, but just an interesting extension to the retail conversation that I thought was appropriate to add here in the Friday episode. Comments from you, Lutzi?
Couple thoughts up top. First of all, if it's a functioning shop in San Francisco, they've obviously got a business model figured out that actually makes sense and keeps the lights on. So I think from the angle of could they go get this money from virtually anywhere, probably they have a leg to stand on when it comes to that. However, by doing it in this way, not like you said, it's engaging the community, but now you have a lot of people who are influential within the Bay Area running scene and likely beyond who are going to be helping them launch the word of mouth down in Southern California as well. They've got skin in the game now. They have a vested interest in it. And I think that's exactly where the value is when it comes to this. I'm not familiar with SMBX or any of that, but this seems to be a way to kind of get that community word of mouth going. And then there's sort of a financial incentive. It's still kind of a gamble. But again, this is a functioning business that already has a proven business model, I would imagine. If they're planning to expand, you got to hope that they already know how to run a shop like this. So I think it's more of a community engagement than it even is a financial thing.
Yeah. And if you know their look and feel and the vibe of the shop, I have a hard time seeing them being unsuccessful in the Los Angeles market. But it's a really good point, right? Like, give your community skin in the game, and it's a good alternative to something like a small business loan, which, you know, you'd probably have to collateralize in some way, or, for example, some sort of seed investment from an individual or family office that would require you to sell a piece of the business. This is more like, hey, we want to expand, we want to bring the Renegade vibe, energy, and culture to a new geography. You guys know us, you love us, help us do this. And in 6 years, we're going to do everything possible to give you a little bit extra in return. Anyway, just an interesting, novel, new approach to funding.
You know what's kind of interesting too is they have an incentive to succeed beyond anything else, because if they're getting their community locally to invest in their expansion, if they fail, not only did they lose LA, but they'll likely lose everything in San Francisco. So it is a little bit of a gamble also. If it doesn't go well, it's not just closing down the LA store, it's having bad word of mouth where their main flagship store is. And that could actually be more dangerous to the brand than anything.
Everything's a gamble, isn't it, Lutzi?
It's all a
Yeah.
roll of the
Well, good
dice.
luck to Victor Diaz and the team at Renegade Running. I may chip in a few bones here and help these guys get down there to SoCal. The next thing we wanted to talk about here, Lutzi, is the viral Nike ad that just came out in advance of the 2024 Paris Olympics. I'm going to let you go first on this one.
Oh boy. Okay. If you haven't seen it, there is a Nike ad that goes something like winning isn't for everyone. And they have Willem Dafoe, a famous actor, famous mostly a character actor in villain style roles, going on this whole rant about, am I a bad person? I'm irrational. I'm, basically I'm selfish. I'll care about power. And he has this big, monologue essentially with all these really aggressive clips of all of Nike's top athletes doing what they do best, which is winning. And we've given a lot of shine to other running brands and shoe brands on this podcast. And I get the idea of trying to give Nike some love. And I'm going to give you a chance to talk, but I didn't love this one. And for a couple reasons. This to me reminds me a lot of the I'm not sure model ad that Nike did a long time ago with Charles Barkley. And I'm not totally sure who Nike is trying to reach with this one. It feels very elite. It feels kind of icky. It's polarizing, no doubt. And a lot of brands are out there to try to polarize and get people on one side or the other. And somewhere in Wyden and Kennedy, which is Nike's ad agency, somewhere in the halls of W&K, they're celebrating the fact that it's polarizing, that people have an opinion. And sometimes that's all you really need sometime to get people talking about it, like on podcasts about the business of the outdoors. That being said, I feel like it's kind of the wrong time, wrong vibe for Nike right now. Their stock is in the tank. They just fired a bunch of people who are definitely not winning right now. I just don't think it was the right time and the right message for them. Uh, it just didn't land, I don't think. Your thoughts, though. I want to hear your take on it.
Okay. So I'm going to take the other side. So again, we got a little friendly disagreement here. And as you've mentioned, we've talked about Nike a bunch. They're going through a little bit of a slump right now. And as I mentioned on last week's end of Friday episode, David Callahan, a good friend of mine he runs ultrasignup.com, posted something about how, people are, I think, prematurely writing Nike off, like they're not going to be successful. They can't battle back from this period of adversity. And I feel like this is a re-engagement with the spirit and ethos and vibe that has made Nike Nike. And as you said, it's definitely intentionally polarizing, starting with the am I a bad person because I'm great at my sport and I just want to win at all costs and beat everybody else and be the alpha and you know, do whatever it takes to stand on top of the mountain. That is Nike. And one of the things that we've talked about is the importance of brand and the importance of like knowing who you are and staying true to that over a long period of time, I think is really, really difficult. But Nike is Nike. If you've ever read Shoe Dog, because of their unending, undying determination to win at all costs. You've read Shoe Dog, right, Lucy?
I have read it. And actually on my other computer here, or on my other screen here, I have pulled up Phil Knight's 1980 memo to the company, which has kind of 10 points that kind of describe the business. And there were 2 points on the memo that really I think resonated the most with this thing. And again, to your point, going back to like who are we as Nike? What is the core of what we believe and what our brand stands for? Number 2 is we're on offense all the time. Okay. Also, number 9, it won't be pretty. Uh, there's a couple other ones in here that are relevant, but I think they came with a very aggressive style. And again, my point is that I don't think it was the right time to put that one out. I feel like the vibe of sports and especially the Olympics is, yeah, sure, there's the whole winning thing, but there's really just like celebrating all the countries coming together, all the people that are involved in it. And this sort of like selfish look that Nike is kind of promoting here just doesn't jibe with the
I
Olympics.
didn't
I don't know.
interpret it as selfish. I interpreted it as the best possible time to drop an ad like this, right before the Olympics, arguably the the pinnacle of athletic competition. At the end of the day, it's about winning. It's about getting medals and being on the podium. And that's what Nike is known for. So I wanted to use this ad as an opportunity to give some shine to Nike, who does still kill it. I mean, come on, they still do like 30 billion in revenue, which makes, the companies like On that we've talked about a million times seem microscopic, even though they are successful in so many different ways. Nike is still a Goliath, it's still
Absolutely.
an absolute monstrosity. And to me, this feels like Wyden Kennedy, the agency that has basically made Nike Nike, creating an ad that goes back to the roots. Win at all costs. It's not going to be pretty on offense at all times. And they're using the faces, the likeness of people like LeBron, Kylian Mbappe, Serena Williams, Jakob Ingebrigtsen, Sha'Carri Richardson, many of whom are going to be competing in Paris over the next few weeks. So to me, it felt like a perfect Nike ad, almost 2 million views in just a couple of days. You're right. It's polarizing, like it's not necessarily my vibe, but if I'm a 15-year-old soccer player in the Dominican Republic or whatever, and I see this, I'm like, I resonate with Nike. I want to win too.
Yeah, I can see the people that they were trying to target specifically on this, and I completely understand that. It's very individual focused where and again, like you're the elite athlete in this discussion, but in my view, the Olympics is a time where we cheer on our entire country as like an entire team. And so Nike going live with an individual versus a team style ad really, that's the thing that makes me scratch my head. And you're right that Nike is this Goliath. And I think your friend David was the one who mentioned that their ad budget is $4 billion a year, which is 4x what On's entire earnings for the entire year is. So, hey, you got $4 billion to spend, and that's what you're going to drop before the Olympics. This is for sure their Olympic ad. They're going to run this one solid through the Olympics. It sounds like there's an out of home thing and all kinds of different elements that are going to come out based on this. Winning isn't for everyone, but I just don't feel like it matches the Olympic vibe. I could see it in a time where we're really celebrating specific individuals in a moment, but when we're all cheering on our country and every country is cheering on their countries, I don't know, man.
All right. Agree to disagree. Second Nature audience, send us a DM. Who won the debate? Pro Nike or anti Nike ad? Anyway, what it did obviously was start a conversation. At the end of the day, that's probably what's important for the
Absolutely.
company and for the brand. So Anyway, fun conversation. Everybody should go check it out. We'll make sure to drop a link to it in the show notes of today's episode. The main topic we wanted to discuss today, Aaron, if you're ready to move on, Super Rider's
Yeah.
about to take over the most populous country in the world. You've referenced this on a couple of past episodes. You're working on getting some of your content into China, and I know you've got an update.
Yeah, I would say about to slash already starting to break some ground over there. So if you heard on a previous podcast, I was headed to LA a couple weeks ago, which is what teed up to that Red Bull visit. I have some partners over in China who are responsible for taking the Super Rider mountain bike content that I put on my YouTube channel, and they're helping me distribute it with Chinese subtitles across all of the social media channels in China. So, for example, in America and other parts of the world, you have YouTube for watching content. Over there, for long form content, you have a platform called Bilibili, and it's basically just Chinese YouTube. And the comments section and all the navigation is all in Chinese. And it kind of makes it difficult for anyone to go over there and really access it. But if you live there, it's great. And you could potentially upload from here and do your best to make your way through everything, or you could have a partner over there that's able to respond in the comments, that's able to tee you up for Q&A videos, that's able to take your content and switch it over. And that's sort of what we've been doing. There are some really interesting programs out there right now too. There's an AI program called HeyGen, and HeyGen will actually take your video footage and switch the language that you're speaking, but keep your intonations, and it'll change the way that your mouth moves. And you can go down the rabbit hole on
Yeah.
that one too. But what I'm doing is I'm working with some partners over there who basically do mountain biking in China. They put on the events, they work with the athletes, they kind of are responsible for the growth of mountain biking. And they were looking for a content creator who could help them kind of pour fuel on the fire of the growing industry over there. And that's exactly why we're working together. They could have worked with any mountain bike YouTuber on the planet. And because I have a lot of kind of beginner intermediate level content, that's going to give all the people over there an opportunity to build their skill set up. And so that's kind of where we started. So we met in LA. We filmed a bunch of Q&A videos that are going to go on all of the channels there, and got kind of an update of how things are going. Now, we met in April for the first time through some mutual friends and then started working together shortly thereafter. They expected it would take about 3 months to get up to 200,000 views on my content on a monthly basis. And in the first month, we did 500,000 views.
Whoa.
So, pretty good start. uh there's definitely some back and forth on what like what that audience wants versus how we do things over here. And so it's been really interesting to talk to them on that. And some of those things are, they explain to me that the audience there, their number one question is, where can I buy this, where can I buy this? And a lot of the companies over here don't send stuff to China, or they're not set up with payment systems to work with the Chinese audience. So there's actually this payment structure called Union Pay, which also encompasses Alipay and WeChat Pay. And those are the main ways, like how we have Venmo and Zelle and everything over here. They use those platforms over in China. And so a lot of websites in the States aren't set up to even take payments from those platforms. So one of the first things that we discussed was like, can you include these things on your website so that people can come over and actually buy product from you because they want to get it?
Oh.
The other thing, the other thing that was interesting me on this sales thing, because I just said, well, why don't you just set up a Chinese homepage and then just run it through there? That way you don't have to ship everything over. And they told me that actually it's more beneficial if it comes from the US, because counterfeiting can be kind of an issue. And they want to be able to show, like, oh no, look, here's the package. It came from the US. This is the real deal. This is legitimate.
In other
And
words, a
so they're
Chinese consumer, if they got a Super Rider trucker hat in the mail and they saw that it was shipped from China, they would assume maybe it's a counterfeit. Hmm.
correct. But because it came from the States, it's worth paying that extra $10 for shipping just to make sure that it's the real deal, which I thought was really cool.
Interesting.
It's a lot more work for me to have to ship everything over. And it's kind of funny that we will likely make a lot of things in China send it to the States, and then send it right back. But I understand the need for authenticity and why that's important to that consumer. So that whole payment structure thing was totally new to me. I just figured everybody used Visa and MasterCard and whatever else Shopify had to offer. And working with the payment platform Ocean Pay, which encompasses all those different payment structures, is pretty difficult and tedious. So there is sort of a barrier in place that is going to take some work. And I think, as we continue to connect more, it's going to become more obvious, and probably more services will come online to make this easier. But as maybe one of the first few creators to really start exploring this market, there's a lot of big question marks and trying to figure out how to do stuff from scratch.
So this
Um,
agency that you're working with is specific to mountain biking. My guess is what's sort of dawning on me is that there's probably a big opportunity and there's probably agencies that exist for other content creators that exist outside of mountain biking but who would like exposure to the Chinese audience. They would probably provide a similar service. Like for example, if Free Trail wanted to do something similar, I bet there are agencies that exist. I know I've listened to a couple of podcasts about how Mr. Beast is basically taking all of his content and translating it into basically every language on planet Earth just to increase his already massive audience.
yeah, yeah. And the way that he does it, they actually have voice actors that are famous in the country that they're from. So there's even these little hooks in how all that stuff comes through. But you're right. I think there's a pretty big business to be made for someone who can go across to the States, pick up the main content creators from any vertical, and then help them build up their business. Because the other side of it is, speaking to that audience, they want certain things from us, or they're able to connect in China with another set of partners. So, for example, companies that are over in China that want to market to that Chinese audience that want to work with me, but maybe they don't need anything out of the States, right? So I can make a whole different set of videos with product integration, with ad reads, with whatever that's relevant to that audience, and essentially like double my money when it comes to partnerships, because there's literally no crossover, and it's going to be translated into a different language. So there's a lot of really interesting little elements that could kind of pop up as we continue to explore this. And there's different ways that I can make content that might not show up on my US channel, but would show up in my Chinese channels, that is more about the lifestyle and what it's like over here, and things that the viewers over in China are really curious about. So there's a lot of different avenues to kind of explore here. And I would say the first meeting, the first kind of kickoff was interesting. The other thing that we talked about was actually putting on a super rider event in China next year. Because again, there are partners over there that are looking to have local events that want to have something really cool. We have now a big running start with 500,000 views in the first month. And we're only going to continue to build on that month over month. So in a year, how many million views are we going to have per month? We're going to have a giant audience over there, and an event would actually make a ton of sense.
Have your
So
partners given you any insight into the growth of the mountain biking category in China as a whole? Because I know outdoor sports in general are exploding there, including trail running.
yeah, we don't have a specific audience number or anything like that yet, but I think this is sort of going to be the main driver of it. And the first video we posted is like tens of thousands of views already, and it's kind of like the basics of mountain biking. And yeah, I can't wait. I would love to have a little bit more data for sure. And just to be frank, this is sort of arbitrage for me, because no matter what, I'm going to make mountain bike videos that help people learn how to ride mountain bikes and get excited about
Right.
mountain bikes. I have a team that's taking that and translating it and posting it for me. So even if nothing happens already, like, we're doing some good, and it's not taking a whole lot of time and effort on my side to get it done. But yeah, if I can make some custom content and continue to push on it, this could be interesting. So I would say we've kind of scratched the surface here with this market. There's definitely promising signs coming. Uh, I don't know the value to my existing partners. I don't necessarily think there's really any immediate value for them, but the potential partners that could open up overseas could be really interesting to explore. and we're just going to have to keep an eye on this
Yeah,
one.
I know all brands basically are trying to figure out how to strengthen their business in China, recognizing that that's a massive growth opportunity as so many millions of people in that country kind of emerge out of poverty into middle class and become more part of the consumption economy. Obviously, China and Asia in general is known as being a manufacturing center, a production center, but now more and more there's commercial opportunity for brands to sell products to Chinese consumers. And I know, bringing it back to trail running for a second, that part of the reason I think that Arc'teryx and Salomon are doing so well right now is because Amer Sports, their parent company, was bought by the Anta Group, which is of course a Chinese brand, which I'm sure, or a Chinese holding company. It's also a Chinese brand. Anta is sort of like the Chinese Nike, but Solomon and Arc'teryx, I think, benefit from the distribution and all the support systems inherent that that Anta has spent a couple decades building, and that's having a lot of positive impacts on their business too. So very interesting. Super Rider does China. I think the brand works there too, man. I mean,
I think it probably works better over there than it does here. One of the main pushbacks that I get on my merch sales specifically is that it's a lot of beginner and intermediate riders who aren't super yet, and so they feel sheepish practicing riding while wearing a super rider shirt. But I feel like in other countries, maybe it's not as I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
practice makes progress, like you say.
That's right.
Well, awesome, man. Well, should we get to a couple of jobs of the week that we noticed?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's dive in.
Okay, cool. You want to go first or should I?
I'll go first. So the job that I picked out for job of the week, which will be in our next round of jobs that we'll post on our LinkedIn channel, is the senior communications manager for bike at Red Bull. Whew, this is a good one. This is really good. So this role is actually based in Austria at the headquarters of Red Bull Media House and Red Bull Global. And when you have a job like this, the senior communications manager role is going to be essentially activating all of the content that Red Bull puts out in the bike category. But the cool thing about it is that not only are you activating the content, which means basically helping spread whatever Red Bull Media House decides to do with the athletes or the events that they build and partner and put out, but you also get a chance to actually ideate on these and work with the athletes and events directly. So imagine something like Red Bull Rampage, you'd have a big hand in being involved with the event in the way that we talk about the event, in the athletes involved in the event. But you could also pitch ideas of how you might bring in other athletes to work with that event. You'll have a hand in the actual projects that Red Bull bike athletes do. There's so much, and in Red Bull there's this culture of best idea wins. So there's this senior communications manager for bike could be the person who comes up with the next cool event format or the next Danny McCaskill video, or you name it. You have so much input and influence in this particular role. It's incredible.
So, who's the right person for this type of a job? Somebody who's obviously core to the bike industry, but what type of experience might this individual have?
Gosh, you could be somebody from the bike industry, but you know how we always talk about cross pollination? Like, sure, you should probably know who the bike athletes are that Red Bull works with globally, but if you come from somewhere else, it's not necessarily the worst thing ever. And I
But you
think
have
that
to be
Red
able to
Bull is
speak the language, right? I mean, it's a
sh-
communications job.
sure, definitely. You need to know who the partners are, you need to know all this stuff. But I think if you had experience in communications outside of the bike industry, but you were passionate about bike, that'd be the perfect crossover. And I think Red Bull is really looking to move beyond just doing super hyper core bike stuff. Like anybody can email Pink Bike now and be like, hey, Red Bull Rampage is this week. And, Red Bull Pink Bike is going to post it. But how could you make the Red Bull bike athletes be relevant beyond the bike industry? And I think somebody who comes from an outside perspective, or, what if you worked at Netflix and then but you really loved riding bikes? This might be a cool thing because you could plug those athletes into a different platform or something along those lines where you're not necessarily from the bike world, you just love bikes, that would be the absolute perfect scenario.
What was it? Senior manager of communications for Bike?
Yes.
Very, very cool. We'll make sure to put a link in the show notes of today's episode. And as you said, we'll include this in the list on our LinkedIn page, linkedin.com. Look up Second Nature Media, and you might find your next great employment opportunity. All right, mine here, Aaron, is from Lululemon. Okay, and I brought this up because I saw your boy Todd Kupke post about it, who's been working at Lululemon in the sports marketing department for a long time. You introduced me to this guy. I've been following him on LinkedIn ever since, and he posted this opportunity, an athlete manager for global sports marketing at Lululemon. I'll put a link again in the show notes. But one thing that I thought was interesting, and I wanted to get your 2 cents on, obviously, like the the job description is pretty obvious here. It's just helping with managing athletes and ambassador programs that they do. Obviously, Lululemon has been known to be very successful with their city and store based ambassadors, in addition to sort of their world class tent pole athletes across several different sports. And one thing that I thought was interesting was that this is a full-time position located in Los Angeles, but it's just a contract through March of 2026. So a pretty long dated contract. That would be like a 21-month contract. And so as I thought about it and wanting to get your 2 cents, it feels to me like this is potentially something to get Lululemon through the Winter Olympics that are going to be happening in early 2026. But would it make sense in that case that this is a full time position based in Los Angeles, right? Why wouldn't they, if this is an Olympic type role, have this individual based out of Vancouver, where I know Lululemon is the main apparel partner of the Canadian Olympic team? So anyway, an awesome role as Lululemon gets more into track and field and more into athlete sponsorship in general. It feels, and obviously is, just a massive and well respected company that I've heard is a great place to work. Why? Yeah, I don't know if there's anything you have to add about why this would be a contract. Is sort of the thing I'm mostly interested in.
The contract thing's kind of interesting, and there's nothing weirder than signing athletes to a contract that outlasts your own. The LA thing makes a little bit of sense to me because one of the problems that we always had at Red Bull was that every athlete manager was regional, so they had like the Northwest or the East Coast. But most times when an athlete becomes successful or they're kind of coming up, they end up moving to the West Coast, and in most cases somewhere around LA because it is sort of the epicenter for every major company and all the terrain that you could possibly ever want for pretty much every sport. And so I think there's sort of some calculus there on that side of things. The the contract side of it, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. It could just be a starting contract, see how it goes. I think it's pretty safe to do I mean, not exactly a short contract, but instead of just offering it as a full-time job where, being an athlete manager is hard. You got to have the vibe, the charisma to really mesh with the athletes. And if you don't, then you put yourself in a really weird position and there's nothing that brand can really do about it. If you did have a contract and you just didn't have the right fit, then I guess they'd have an easier way kind of wrapping things up. I don't really understand why any other reason why it would be contract though. That seems strange to me.
As somebody who comes from this world, what do you think about athlete manager roles for Lululemon specifically? Because obviously, it feels like they are more and more investing in traditional sports marketing. They have
Mhm.
several athletes who are going to be competing in the Paris Olympic Games. And in general, I mean, we started our entire podcast by talking about the Lululemon Further event, which, indicates that they're getting very serious about higher performance athletes and endurance athletes. What do you think about the opportunity of helping to build an athlete roster for a brand like Lulu?
I think the other thing, this is just my take on it, but when you look at what Lulu has to offer in terms of gear, it's very much like sort of lifestyle. It's not high performance gear. You know, you're not looking, even the new shoes that they had for the Further project weren't technically super shoes. And I think that the current offering that they have isn't necessarily informed by a lot of pro athletes input. And so having an athlete manager there who can help assist the athletes to provide input on shoes, on clothing, on gear, whatever you want, that might actually make a ton of sense for Lulu as they kind of continue to expand into more footwear, into more gear, into more sports in a more professional sense. Not to say that yoga isn't a high performance sport, but I think if they're really serious about track and field, if they're really serious about being involved in mainstream sports and having some endorsements and actual athlete partnerships that are meaningful, they're going to need someone to kind of manage that process from start to finish, and that's where the athlete manager comes in. It's not just about signing the contract. It's really about getting the value out of the athlete of what they know. What do they want to see in product from Lululemon? And how can that person kind of shuttle that information back and forth between the product team and the athlete?
It's interesting to me that it doesn't specify what types of athletes or really the scope of responsibilities of this person, except for, the more general, you will help in a cross functional way to support our Lululemon athletes and our store ambassadors. It doesn't say, for example, this individual will be scouting, supporting, recruiting new ambassadors for ski, snowboard, run, for example. You know what I mean?
They they may not want to tip their hand
Right.
on that one either. You know, they may have it. There's always like what you see on the job listing and then what the hiring manager has on their actual checklist, right? So they may be listening for like what their background is, where are they coming from. Lulu's actually hired quite a few people from Red Bull, which is kind of interesting, just because maybe there's sort of a generalist mentality between those athlete managers. You know, at one point I was managing over 20 athletes across a ton of different disciplines. And that generalist mentality of being able to be credible or at least have enough information to be dangerous was pretty useful. We weren't pigeonholed into a specific sport. Although bike was my background, I could still talk to an ultra runner and a guy who played, video games, or a skier or a snowboarder or didn't matter. So that may be it. They're looking for someone who can kind of do a little bit of everything, or their secret checklist has ski and snowboard on
Yeah. If only Aaron Lutzi was on the job market right now.
it. Hard
Yeah.
pass.
Indy. Well, you know what's interesting, and we can sort of end on this before we get to BPC in a way that might tie things together. But, if Lulu got into more high performance world championship level athletes, is that a departure from the core spirit of the brand that people have connected with so profoundly over a long period of time? In other words, going back to the Nike ad, which is all about win, 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 win. We do nothing but win, even if it makes us a bad person. If Lulu begins to build out a sports marketing program and they start going after the athletes you would usually associate with Nike, those being the people who are going to be standing on top of Olympic podiums, does that in some way, detract from the core ethos of the brand? Because I think this Wieden Kennedy ad, to repeat something I said earlier, was their attempt to reestablish, the founding values of Nike. Is Lulu, in other words, moving away from the founding values of Lulu?
I mean, I think Nike's founding value, and a lot of brands, they want polarizing to be one of their founding values. I don't, I know that that can't be Lululemon's one of their founding values. And so, however they move into high performance gear, I don't think that polarizing is part of it. What I do think is that a lot of their gear is really, really high quality. And that would probably be more of the focus than anything. Like, this is the best of this, and I think they would probably play to the performance side of things, but not to the level of being polarizing. And I think that works for certain brands. Not every brand has to make you love slash hate them. It definitely, in Nike's case, gives you an opinion, gives you stuff to talk about. But I think, to Nike's defense, they need that. They need people to start talking about them that way. And I have I'm confident that Nike is going to come back really strong, just to bring it back to them. But I think they're going to come back really strong. I think that that ad that they put out, they've probably been working on that since the beginning of the year before the stock took a huge dive. And so I think you're not really going to see Nike come back swinging for a while because this stuff takes time. I would imagine at best case scenario, like late Q4, maybe we'll see them start to get back in the fight. But again, like coming up with this stuff, not everybody's bandit running that can just like turn on a dime and, ambush the Olympic trials. And certainly not Nike, a company that size. I think companies like Lulu are kind of in the middle there where they can move a little bit faster, but they don't need to rely on polarizing messaging to get the message out that they make really high quality apparel.
Well, what's clear is there's a ton of cool opportunities in the industry right now, both at Red Bull and Lulu, but many other places. So again, go to linkedin.com, search Second Nature Media, where our boy Matt Sharkey helps us curate lists of new jobs in the space. We'll post more in the very near future. Finishing with BPC. Can I go first? Because you just gave me the perfect segue.
Please.
Okay. Like On Running, we talk about Bandit basically every episode here on the podcast. And they just made a major announcement that is very cool also, and struck me as something that you would have profound insights on. They just announced that they are now the kit sponsor for a small Caribbean nation's track team at the Paris Olympics. That small nation is St. Vincent and the Grenadiers, an island nation that I've probably never heard of. But of course, as we know, those Caribbean island nations often turn out some of the most talented sprinters on planet Earth. And what an interesting brand activation to take this obscure track team that probably has quite a lot of talent on it. I haven't had a chance to do a scouting report on who the top athletes are from St. Vincent and the Grenadiers, but what a cool brand activation. What a cool way to cut through the noise of the Olympics in a way that really differentiates the brand. And they made, most importantly, a freaking amazing, beautiful looking kit, very well designed kit that also is striking and stands out. So they're differentiating both in strategy and in just the look and design of the kit. So this is a mix between brand and product. Bandit Running sponsoring St. Vincent and the Grenadiers, another very cool sponsorship in addition to what we've talked about here on the pod with their unsponsored project at the US Olympic trials in track and field. This an extension of that for the Paris Olympic Games. Comments from you?
I love this kit. It looks so cool. It's so cool. I would wear this
I know I want
100%.
to buy some of it. I hadn't seen if it was available yet for purchase, but I'm like rooting for the team now, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting on the Olympic side because they're not actually sponsoring these athletes. They're paying the fee to that country to be the kit sponsor, right? That's how it kind of works.
Which
Uh
is
eh, eh,
probably pretty cost effective. That's kind of what I was getting at, right? Like if you're going to
yeah.
try and be the sponsor for Team Great Britain or the US or France or even like South Africa, it's probably quite a lot of money, but a small island nation that may only be sending athletes to compete in track and field, a cost effective way. And then when you do good marketing around it, as they have, they made a cool video about it. I'm not sure if you had a chance to watch,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the cost, the impact probably outstrips the cost, in other words.
Yeah, and I think they've been really smart with both this and the Olympic trials. They've clearly in their marketing calendar circled the Olympics and the Olympic trials as kind of their moment to break out and do some things that aren't expected. And I love that about this whole process is that it wasn't just the Olympic trials. They had a bigger plan for the Olympics in general. And to see this kind of dot get connected is really cool. The fact that they weren't just relying only on the Olympic trials to get their bite at the apple, but now they've got another Olympic related thing to talk about. Um, and yeah, and then they followed up with some pretty fire kits. So I'm here for it.
Awesome. Your BPC.
Well, I was going to go kind of on the same thread here. Friday, the day that we release this podcast, is actually the opening ceremony for the Olympics. I feel like this is a key time for a lot of the outdoor industry sports to really shine. It's an interesting moment for a lot of the athletes. And from a business standpoint, kind of an interesting phase for anyone's career. Now, the Olympics has a specific rule where you can't really do anything to show your sponsors during the blackout window of the Olympics,
So
right? So if
dumb.
you're
So dumb.
they are softening the rules a little bit. Like you can pre-qualify your partners, and then your partners are able to uh, uh kind of shout you out, but they can't say Olympics. They have to, kind of work around it a little bit. But it's gotten better. A while ago, we actually had to take our Olympic athletes off of the Red Bull website, erase any trace of them on anything we had, which was just a nightmare. Now it's a lot more chill because I think the Olympics understands that these athletes, exist outside of the Olympics. But it's a weird time for brands. It's a weird time for the athletes. And, these athletes are incentivized usually for competitions because to do well in a competition means that you're putting your brand's logo on the top step of the podium. But the Olympics is like, well, I can't offer the number one value to my sponsors that I traditionally do. Yet this is one of the biggest moments in most of the sports, not every sport, but most of the sports. This is still kind of the peak of the sport. So it's always interesting to see in the wake of the Olympics how each brand kind of operates and how each athlete operates based on their results and kind of working around the blackout period of the Olympics. So this is sort of my favorite time of the year just to watch the different approaches. And this whole thing that we've seen with Bandit has been an absolute masterclass in how to stay relevant and in part of the conversation with the Olympics without having to spend a giant chunk of money to the IOC. And I'm sure there are a lot of other examples. And if anybody else has seen anyone, please send us a DM on the Second Nature Instagram with anything else you've seen, because I love checking these out just to see how other brands kind of skirt around the IOC. It's
So
awesome.
is your BPC the Olympics?
I would say so. The Olympic, yeah. Well,
Cool.
and also today the Winter Olympics for 2030 and 2034 were just
Yep.
announced. So 2030, it's going to be in the French Alps, which is
Yep.
epic, and then Salt Lake City in 2034 after that. So this is as close to an Olympic episode as I think you and I are probably going to get, shy of maybe interviewing an Olympian. But yeah, exciting times right now. There's some, big events going on, but all the things that brands are doing to sort of work around it, that's where my attention is right now.
Rad. So I'm on Bandit Running's website right now, and you cannot buy the St. Vincent and the Grenadiers kit. And it reminds me of when you said the miss from the U.S. Olympic trials was that you couldn't buy that unbranded black singlet that they had put out. But I mean, that makes me think, as I speculated in that previous episode, that there's some rule preventing them from doing so, because I would immediately buy both right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't
They must
know. I don't think
understand that, you know?
the
Unless
Olymp the Olymp
they're just, they're small, scrappy, the supply chain, they couldn't turn it around quickly enough. I don't know. There must be a rule.
I mean, I don't know about the Olympic kit, but the unsponsored thing could be huge for them because there's so many unsponsored athletes out there. They could and should be completely owning that, and I still think it's a miss. I hope, I guess I hope, I don't know, that it's actually a rule that they can't work around, but man, I can't imagine that there'd be some rule of like you can't sell the kit that an athlete ran at the Olympic trials. That doesn't make any sense to me. Like selling the Olympic kits, maybe, but the Olympic trials, you could wear anything. You could wear a cotton white T-shirt in the event if you
But I
wanted
mean,
to. And
they're smart enough to do that, though. I mean, that's what's confusing, right? Because, I mean, obviously they're crushing it so hard on the ideas, the activation, the marketing.
yeah, yeah.
Obviously, they're
I mean,
smart enough to follow through with the product. There must be something, some reason
I'm
why.
sure I'm sure they're getting plenty of brand lift from both of these activations. I just think there's a bigger opportunity that they could be tapping into, and maybe maybe that's on their roadmap for 2025 to have an unsponsored line. If they don't do it, someone else is gonna. So clock is ticking.
Yeah. Well, before we close here, I'm reminding myself now that as we move away from the job of the week, you and I have an important phone call later on this week where, as we've teased a couple of times here on the pod, we're working on bootstrapping our own little brand, our own little product into the world. And we're sort of looking for somebody who can actually run that operation, sort of a pseudo CEO, if you will. And we're having an important conversation on that. And next week's episode, we're going to be talking with Ian Gates, who's a trademark lawyer who's helped both Aaron and I individually and on our joint project that I'm referencing here. Anyway, sort of some cool stuff. I don't know if, and also, Aaron, we should mention that we need help from graphic design. We're working on a couple logo and sort of brand ideas that we need help with. So if you're a graphic designer, or if you know somebody who has a proven track record, you can throw us your portfolio, drop it in our DMs on Instagram or on LinkedIn, or you can just email it to me. My email is dylan@freetrail.com. You can just do that. And we would
I
love to chat.
Yeah, I think we could not only for our project, but I think Second Nature could do with a little touch up. I mean, we got a good
That's what I
logo and
mean.
brand
We definitely have
to get started,
two
but
brand projects for Second Nature and for our super secret stealth project.
that's
So
right. That's
if you're
right.
a good graphic designer, a good brand person, hit us up. We would love to chat. Closing comments from you,
Absolutely.
Aaron?
I'm just excited to keep this train rolling. This project that you and I are working on, and even the discussions we've been having about the future of Second Nature have been so exciting. We see the response from everybody and the excitement from everybody, and to continue building everything that we are has just been so fun. And I can't wait to see where all this stuff goes. 20 episodes in, and I feel like we're just getting
Just
started.
getting started. So, as usual, make sure you go follow us on Instagram, secondnature.media, subscribe to our newsletter, navigate to secondnature.media, punch in your email address there, and then go to LinkedIn, search us out, and give us a follow on that platform. Also, we'll be back in your earbuds Tuesday of next week with a cool conversation about trademarks. For Aaron Lutzi, I'm Debo. Peace out.